Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth, I'm 17 years old, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 12. I created this video to help kids and teens with type 1 diabetes and their parents to know that they aren't alone. I know that there's a lot of information out there about how to manage the technical and medical aspects of diabetes, but what is often not talked about as much is the emotional aspect of it. So today, you will hear from a pediatric endocrinologist, a psychologist, and a school nurse discussing their perspectives on the emotional aspect of type 1 diabetes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Gandrud, and I'm a pediatric endocrinologist. As an endocrinologist, I take care of children, teens, and young adults with endocrine or hormone disorders. Type 1 diabetes is one of these disorders, and about half the patients I see in clinic have diabetes. It's normal for parents to have a number of different emotional reactions when their child is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Many are in disbelief or in denial of the diagnosis, wanting more information to prove that their child does indeed have the disease. Other parents feel guilty, thinking that they may have fed their child certain foods or let their child eat a certain number of sweet foods, which led to the diagnosis, which is absolutely incorrect. Many people feel sad about the diagnosis, thinking about how the disease may in fact impact their child's life or their child's social situation. And it's extremely common for parents to feel overwhelmed, anxious, and fearful about what the diagnosis means for their child and their family. You will have high numbers, you will have low numbers. Deal with those numbers and move on, and don't carry those with you. Think about potentially why they happen and efforts to prevent them in the future, but don't ever let those episodes of highs or lows define how you feel you're doing to manage your child's diabetes. The other piece of advice I have is that this is a team sport. We never expect the child to care for their diabetes alone, whether they're 8, 18, or 28. We never expect parents to care for diabetes alone at any stage of the disease. Healthcare team works with parents, parents work with children, and it's always important to keep that team aspect of diabetes care in mind. It's also important to address emotions that your child may be having. It's natural for them to feel angry or to feel sad or to feel overwhelmed, just as it's natural for parents to feel those emotions as well. And we want to address those emotions. We want kids to feel free to express those emotions and even seek additional counseling or support from social workers, psychologists, or other therapists. It's very important to address any emotional distress because that impacts diabetes management. And I really feel strongly that we want to address both health and happiness because they go so hand in hand. I also feel that it's important for parents to avoid asking their child about their diabetes as the first question when they see their child. It's important to recognize the positive things that the child is doing to care for their diabetes rather than to initially always focus on the negatives. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and you want to be able to sustain all of this hard work over a long period of time. Take care of yourself. Take care to recognize all the great work that you're doing for your child. It's important to recognize that diabetes can be a huge burden, not only to the person with diabetes, but to the entire family. Diabetes can disrupt normal family activities. It can change the family's diet and meal routine. It can impact a family's vacation routines and plans. It can cause tension between parents and children, siblings, and older siblings sometimes have the burden of participating in the care of their younger sibling who has type 1 diabetes, which can be difficult as well. In addition to the healthcare team, there are a number of resources available to parents and families whose child has been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. School nurses are an invaluable resource for families because they're such an integral part of the child's diabetes management. There are also support groups available at a number of local clinics. And the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, which is a national organization, has local chapters which provide all sorts of different resources in terms of support groups, educational opportunities, and networking opportunities, as well as advocacy opportunities. The American Diabetes Association holds a number of different diabetes camps each summer across the country, and these are great experiences for children. And there are also a number of different national organizations which can be helpful as well, including Children with Diabetes and the
Hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Jerstead, and I am a psychologist here at Children's Minnesota. And in particular, I provide psychological services in the diabetes clinic. I work with kids and their families who have type 1 diabetes. And my role in the clinic is to provide emotional support and help with coping and adjustment to having type 1 diabetes. It's a chronic illness, so it does change day-to-day life, and it's important for kids and families to get help coping with the changes that type 1 diabetes can bring. And I'm happy to help and answer some questions about coping with a new diagnosis of type 1 diabetes and setting up a great situation for managing it going forward. So one question relates to kids and parents' emotional reaction to the original diagnosis from a mental health standpoint. I've worked with lots of kids at different ages, and the reaction can really vary. It seems to depend on if kids and families understand what type 1 diabetes is. I've met a number of families who had no idea what type 1 diabetes was. And so it took a little bit for it to sink in and for kids to understand what this actually means. Versus there are kids who have type 1 diabetes, family members and friends who have it as well. So they're more familiar with it. But regardless, one of the things that I notice is there is a component of grief. People feel like they have lost the normal life that they've had. They used to be able to eat meals without thinking about it and have lots of freedom with that. And type 1 diabetes does kind of bring a bit of an end to that freedom. Kids and families have to be more planful and think about what they're eating, take insulin, test blood sugar, and just be concerned about safety. So I think for kids and families, there's a feeling of loss of that normal life. Some kids feel worried about talking about it with other kids. They don't want to be the focus of attention. They don't want other people to know that they have a chronic illness. A lot of kids talk about wanting to just feel normal. And so one of the things that I want to be able to help kids and families with is making type 1 diabetes a normal part of their everyday life. I remind them that they can do the same things that any kid without type 1 diabetes can do. They can participate in sports, they can go swimming, they can eat what they want to for the most part, but be mindful, just like any kid should, about what they're eating. So I really talk with families that this is a team approach, especially for kids with new diagnoses. Parents and kids should work together. As kids get a bit older, maybe kids who've had type 1 diabetes for a long time, it's important for that child to get some freedom in managing their diabetes. Parents worry and want to constantly check in and make sure they're doing okay. But parents have to really accept that at some point their child will be managing this entirely on their own. So I talk with kids and parents about how to create a healthy dynamic where families and kids are working together effectively. So one of the things I'll tell parents is don't make it the very first thing that you ask your child when you see them when they come home from school or from being somewhere. What's your number? How's your diabetes today? Because it makes it feel like their whole life is about that. And it's important to let kids know their life is about a lot of other things. Second, find appropriate times to talk about it around mealtime when the kid does have to take insulin or dose for their meal or check blood sugar. It is a good time to check in about it. But also, I encourage kids, take initiative, take responsibility, be the one to tell your parents, hey, I checked my blood sugar and this is where it is, and this is what I'm taking for my meal. That way parents start to see, okay, my kid has more responsibility and I can start to back off. Another component that's really important is the mental health component. Sometimes kids feel sad and stressed about dealing with diabetes. It could just be hard to have a diabetes day that's stressful. So I do encourage parents to check in, just like, how are you doing? Are you feeling okay? Are you stressed or frustrated with having diabetes? Sometimes it can feel like it's limiting for getting together with friends or, participating in certain activities. And maybe parents can say, is there anything I can do to help ease the burden a little bit for you? And so I'll give parents and kids kind of tips about how to navigate that together. Maybe the parent can say, for a little while, I'll be the one to remind you, or I will calculate your carbohydrates for you. But really, it's important to check in with a child. Is that going to be helpful? Finally, I want to talk a little bit about how I can help parents and kids cope emotionally when they are first dealing with a diagnosis. It takes usually 6 months to a year to completely adjust to something new. So I let families know it's going to take some time. Allow yourself that time to adjust and adapt. Provide connections, if possible, to other kids who have type 1 diabetes. This can be done through camps or through finding resources at Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, which is JDRF. Connecting kids to others can really help feel like it's normalizing and they can relate to kids who are dealing with type 1 diabetes. And to let them know it's okay to have hard days, and if they need to talk about it or get support beyond their family, to connect them with mental health support. It's something I'm happy to help kids cope with. I hope that was helpful information.
Hi, my name is Amy Mylash. I am a school nurse. I currently work at an elementary school in West St. Paul. I have been doing school nursing for 14 plus years now at a private school. It's grades pre-K through 8th grade. The experience that I have had dealing with type 1 diabetes students during this time, I feel has been somewhat limited. It's been a combination of existing students that already have the diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, as well as some newly diagnosed type 1 diabetes students. Some of the students have insulin pumps, some are still using injectable insulin and or a combination. All of the students that I have had experience with have been in the middle school, so from grades 6th through 8th. I don't have any experience with any elementary age students. I do feel that the middle school age is probably the most difficult age for a student if they are newly diagnosed, just because on top of dealing with normal adolescent stuff, they have a new diagnosis that they need to deal with. So we were asked what emotions and reactions newly diagnosed students have. And I think what I have come across is the following. The emotions and the reactions are not just alone for the student. It involves their families, it involves their teachers, it involves the other students around them, their friends. But I came up with the top 4 that I think is mostly dealt with. And the first one that I talk about is anger. Angry that they have to deal with having diabetes, angry that it's happening to them. Another emotion that I see is fear. They're afraid of something that they don't understand or know very much about at the very beginning. Then I also feel there's a lot of denial. They feel fine. How can something be wrong with them? And physically they can't see anything wrong once they've gotten past that initial fixing, usually after probably coming from the hospital or a blood glucose level reading that was high. And another emotion that I think I see a lot from the students is shame. They now have a label. They have a label that makes them different from others. They might not want that extra attention. So in thinking about how can parents deal with anxieties of a newly diagnosed student at school and going back to school, as well as their own anxieties related with that, I think from a school nurse's perspective, it's important that there be a routine established with the student. At school, at the beginning, a routine is very important. It may not last for very long if you find the student is taking on their own responsibilities at a quicker pace than another one. But establishing a routine, I think, is very important. I also think it's important that they have a buddy or a friend at school that they can come up to the nurse's office with, be a few minutes late to the lunchroom, have them to sit with them next to in the lunchroom if they are walking in late. I also feel it's really important that they establish some type of relationship with the school nurse. The school where I work is a shared spot, so there are 2 nurses there. And you have 2 very different nurses, so each nurse needs to develop that individual relationship with the student. And then I think the biggest way that anxiety can be dealt with the parents and the students on a new diagnosis like this is communication. That's huge and it's key. We need to know what the family's expectations are at school, of the nurse, of the teachers. We need to have the orders in the nurse's office. We need a number for that direct line to the diabetes care source that you're using and facilitating the care for that student. We need to know what tools they have for monitoring, whether it be a phone app, if we're emailing the parents on a daily basis, on a meal basis, at lunchtime, what kind of charting we're responsible for as far as navigating and keeping results for that student and parents. And then we also need to know, who do they all want to know at school? Who do we need to teach and share this information with? Teachers, classmates, the secretaries, the administration, their own friends at school. And we need to remind those students that they'd probably want to know if one of their friends had something going on with them that they could be helpful with or be aware of. I think something else that is very helpful to decrease any kind of level of anxiety is to help prepare the student and the parents with answers to questions that they might get asked from other parents, from the teachers, from other students and friends. And the message really should be that diabetes is nothing to be ashamed of. It needs to be managed, but you're able to do that while you're still at school, you're still playing sports, life in general, you're able to do that. And then a final thought was just some general things from the school nurse's perspective when you're dealing with a newly diagnosed student and family at school. Give yourself time to adjust. Help build the confidence with some regular routine care and stress management so that student and the family begins to feel a little bit more comfortable in the whole new situation. Make sure again that they know diabetes is manageable. Make sure you utilize the diabetes care team that they have established a relationship with already. That's information that needs to be spoken to the school nurse, that they have that information readily available to them. Take your diabetes management routine seriously. I know it's really hard, especially as a middle school student or a teen, because you don't feel a whole lot of things. Skipping your blood sugar checks or an insulin dose because you feel fine, down the line, that's when serious problems can result. And I don't think that's something that's understood by a middle school student or a student at school at first. I really think that's the hardest thing probably for a student to grasp, is the long-term results of not managing your diabetes properly. And then understand and take some precautions when you can. When you know you're exercising, when you know you're traveling, maybe you're coming early for play practice or you're staying late for a sports practice. Or if it's a before Christmas and you've got a bunch of tests going on, so you're under some more stress, or if you're not feeling well, know that things will change, your routine will change in those given situations, and just kind of be aware of that. That's something that's a little bit farther down the line once you've had some months under your belt and gotten a routine in place. And then just try to plan ahead as much as you can. Again, like for the morning play practices or sports practices, make sure you've got extra snacks with you, extra blood sugar supplies. The student may choose to carry some, there may be some in the nurse's office. A lot of different approaches, and each student is so individualized. You really have to look at a student individually, as well as their families, what they expect, and then also reevaluate after time has gone on, how they're doing at school, what needs to change, what's working, what's not. And just remember that diabetes is very manageable and you can do it. Thank you.
Thank you to our professionals for sharing their perspectives, and thank you all for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you're looking for more information about coping with diabetes, check the description box below for more resources. Know that you aren't alone, and you can do it. The diabetes community is rooting for you.